Happy Saturday, everyone. Welcome to our channel. Excited to have Katie here with me today. My name is Tiffany. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we are SAV, Subtle Asian Voices. It's really a platform for Asian Americans to share their experiences on several topics such as relationships, dating, mental health, which is the topic of today's segment, and professional development. And so, Katie, this is not the first time we've seen you.
Right.
Would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, hey guys, my name is Katie. I also have my own personal YouTube channel, but today I'll be on this episode to share my experience, and hopefully my approach can help you guys take which approach you guys want to take when you like to execute and look for a counselor or therapist yourselves.
Yes. So our topic today is seeing a therapist for the first time. And the format of today's segment will be a little bit different than you have seen in the past. So due to some scheduling, actually, this is not a live stream. This is a pre-recorded session. So we had pre-recorded this session, but we will be joining at the normal time of our live stream to connect with you via chat. So unfortunately, we're not able to take any audience questions in the chat feature this week. However, we will be interacting with you during our normal live stream time. So today's session will really be a dialogue between Katie and myself, Tiffany, and we would love to share with you some of Katie's experiences as she's going through her counseling and therapy journey. So could you first start maybe by telling us how you got started? What prompted you to really want to see a therapist to begin with? Sometimes it's a little, there's stigma associated with seeing a therapist or seeing a counselor.
Right. So a little background story starting off. My first introduction to anything counseling or psychology related was from being on the women's golf team in college. And my coach introduced our team to a sports psychologist therapist to work with us because the mental game in any sport is highly important, and that can affect how you play or perform. And from that, it was great, but it was more of a group setting, and it kind of made me not feel all the way okay and thought I needed more than just the sports psychology focus. So my coach at the time, my golf coach, recommended me to see a professional to fulfill my social and just college things that I'm going through.
Can you tell me a little? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And then eventually she shared with me that the school had free psychology services for all students. And of course, I had to utilize that my very last semester of college, my senior year, and then we went from there.
Oh, that sounds great. So you mentioned that you first started off in a group. What was that experience like? I know for me personally, especially around people that I'm not comfortable with, I don't want to necessarily share personal things. So I think I would have felt uncomfortable in such a large setting to share some personal things that I would prefer to share with a counselor. So what was your experience like in that group setting?
Right. It was more interactive, seeing how as a team we can be better players. So it wasn't focused all individually, but it was still great because we got to learn about each other's mental game when we play or golf.
Wow. So kind of sharing best practices or how other members have done.
Yeah,
okay.
Whether it's routine or what goes through your mind when this happens, or when you're working with the dog leg or wind or whatnot. We just kind of walk through our painted picture in our mind.
Okay. Very great. And so you mentioned that there were some resources available at your college that were able to kind of direct you in that direction. What other resources did you use? Was it kind of just by referral?
Honestly, I knew it was free, so I plopped myself in the building where they provided the counseling for students, and I took a quiz and they paired me up with what they felt was best matched. And
okay.
I ended up getting paired with a master's student that was doing clinical hours for counseling, and I did that every other week, because actually at the same time, which I don't really recommend, them being a master's student, I wasn't sure if all of their practices or recommendations was like super professional, because they were still studying for their master's, and I wanted someone with more experience. So at the same time, I went to another therapist at an actual hospital and went to counseling every week, but kind of went to each counselor like every other week. So it was a lot of repetitive, but I wanted to get all the insights I can. And actually, I did learn a lot of approaches, because a lot of their therapy counseling was just helping you become aware and make the best decisions for yourself to like be more at peace.
Wow, that sounds like, honestly, that sounds a little stressful, juggling two different therapists.
Yeah.
How long were you doing that before you decided, okay, I can't keep doing this? And I'm assuming you stopped doing this.
Right. And honestly stopped because I was graduating. So I started August of 2017, and then I graduated in December of 2017. So it was like at most 15 weeks of counseling.
Okay.
And then,
yeah, you mentioned it was your last semester, right?
Right, last semester of college. And it was a good span of time, but honestly, I learned it was not enough time. So when I moved back to my new area, I was on a lookout for another therapist that was like closer to me. So that kind of what inspired me to go back to counseling. And
okay. I'm going to come back to this topic because I think it's important to share with the viewers, if you're comfortable, how, like, what approach you took to find this therapist ultimately. But could you maybe tell me about your first therapy session? Because I think that will give a framework for our audience on what therapy was like for you that actually prompted you to continue wanting to see a therapist.
Right. Yeah, so the first counseling session I ever went, it was kind of like a get to know you session. Like, how can the counselor help you? Because you're obviously seeking for help. I was seeking for help. So it was an hour long, sometime an hour and 15 minutes. And they just get to know your story, just kind of lay out like a skeleton of stories to see like what they can work with. And if there's some underlying issues or like trauma or like past experiences that make you feel this way or think this way. And their goal was to either help guide, unshake that, or just be more aware of yourself so that you can like handle yourself, because it's such a mind game, like being on your own. So that's why they're there, to help you. And then from there, whatever you shared at that first session, they it'll lead it to the next, and they usually have like call to actions. So like, okay, this is what you can do this week. Write this T chart, a pros and cons list, or like rank these in order, and then we'll check back next week how those relationships are doing with whoever you're having problems with, or how did you handle the stress these last 2 weeks, or like what did you do to prep, or like call to actions, because you can't be stagnant. That's
like
the
homework.
point of therapy. Yeah. Right.
Therapy homework. Okay. Could you also maybe share what the environment of like your therapy session looked like? Because I know sometimes you see it like in the videos, and it's like a chaise lounge, and the counselor's in their chair.
Loungy, actually.
Okay.
They're all in private rooms, and they actually have these machines that like filter sound, so like the next door walls cannot hear. So it's like a soundproof room.
Okay.
And then they usually have like an L-shaped setup, like couch and another couch, so it's like comfortable, because they want you to like be able to talk. And yeah, and of course each room had their own personalities according to that therapist.
Okay,
So,
okay.
but it's usually fine. There's a window.
Cool. So not
Yeah,
scary. Not
not
not like
scary.
not like hospital bed or
Oh,
like
no,
those type of
no.
scenarios. Okay.
Yeah, very like trying to make you comfortable, like kind of like this. This chair
Okay.
behind me, and then just a cozy environment to chat.
Okay.
Mhm.
Cool. So then maybe we can fast forward back to when you were returned to where you were living after you finished school, and then you
Mhm.
decided you wanted to continue seeing a therapist, but you had to see one
Mhm.
that was closer to you. What approach did you take at that moment to
Right.
go on your search?
Yeah, so I was starting my very first job out of college, probably like 5 months after I graduated when I first found my job, after like being a digital nomad and doing whatnot. And I felt like I was ready to take care of myself again after I was traveling. So I was just like having fun. And I found this doctor of psychology. So he was super old, but I really liked that he was really well experienced, like years, like
Hmm.
probably at least 20 plus experience. I was like, okay, this can for sure probably help me with my problems and shake it off. And I think I was on Google. I was like, oh, um, counselors near me, therapy near me. And I found the
Mm.
guy, and he was at a private practice. And I really liked the name of the place. I know you shouldn't judge it by that, but I thought it really spoke to me and connected with me. So I was like,
Hmm.
hey, I'll give it a go. And I arrive, and heads up, I realized that health insurance does not cover mental health related appointments, unfortunately. So I did pay out of pocket. So
Okay.
um, I was getting to know my counselor for the first time. So again, that first meeting was like
Hmm.
a backbone of like my background and what I'm seeking help for.
Okay.
And yeah, so I did like a mini package of 3 sessions, and used up all three and decided it was too expensive because I just started my first job, and I put that on hold.
That's very real.
Yeah, very real.
In terms of accessibility for mental health. And, you know, I appreciate you sharing your experience. And I think everyone's insurance is a little bit different. Um,
Mm,
so if I can share, like, I know I have a deductible, and I also had to pay out of pocket up until the deductible. But because of the pricing of the sessions, like, I think that counted for a couple sessions, and then the remainder were covered under my plan. So really
mm,
encourage everyone to, take a look at their specific insurance plan, because everyone's a little bit different. It's
mm,
also very different if you've got an in-network or out-of-network provider. So definitely check out your insurance plan. And I'm sorry to hear that
mm.
it was expensive. Like, that's so
Yeah.
real though, Katie. And I've heard of
Mm,
therapists that have sliding scales sometimes. Um, and I know there are also like telehealth type options too, if you're comfortable with that. So definitely many resources. But I see that
mm.
in traditional insurance, insurance and mental health too.
Right. So
So then what happened?
yeah, some viewers might be concerned like with the pricing, location, and time because it does take um, like financial and your time. But if you have an open mind approach, like, hey, you're taking care of yourself and you're investing like help back to yourself. So it's going to be worth it, even if the therapist doesn't work out, because then you'll just go on to the next therapist that you better connect with. Because
Hmm.
it's very much like a one on one, like relationship, like a business relationship too.
Okay.
Um,
Can you also
mhm,
share what outcomes you had coming out of therapy? So you mentioned, for you it was
mhm.
worth it. It was helping you. What exactly did that look like?
Yeah, a couple of my therapy sessions was finding out tests. I wanted to make sure I didn't like um, had any mental health illness, so I did a lot of screening tests to like diagnose if I had ADHD. And I know because I had like a hunch that I had that, And after I took that test, I wasn't in the diagnosed bracket of having ADHD, but it was so funny because I was like very much almost there, but
Okay.
it wasn't. And then I took like a depression test, and I was diagnosed depressed, and so other stuff like that. Like I did like anti-personality disorder tests, anxiety, like any test you can think of mentally wise. I probably did a screening that I had a hunch like maybe I had, and then it was like confirmed I didn't. It was just basically depression, anxiety, and then I wanted to go natural. They like recommended me to go on medicine for that because it's chemical imbalances. But I really try to go natural and just talk it out. So
Okay.
yeah, sometimes, actually all the time, each new counselor that I've been to, they always recommend if I wanted to go the clinical route and do medicine, but I always turn it down. So that's all up to you.
Okay.
Mm.
I'll come back to that. But you prompted some another question from me. Like, how did you feel when you were diagnosed with those? Um, I don't know the right term for it. Is it
Yeah,
considered
the
an illness condition?
conditions.
Yeah. How did you feel when you were
Um,
diagnosed? Because you didn't know, you thought, and then you went through
right.
all the screening and you got some answers, right?
Mm. Yeah, it just kind of confirmed like, oh, that's why I'm feeling that way, but it makes sense. Now I can take whatever steps I can to either help it or like cope with it, because I don't think it really goes away. You just get better at handling your condition or
Mm,
situation, at least for my personal experience. I know like people can have it really bad and worse, so I work
okay.
with what I can and go from there.
Okay. That makes
Mm-hmm.
sense, right? Like you didn't know what it was before, and given the label now, you're able to identify it and then
Mm-hmm.
consciously work at it. Whereas before
Mm-hmm.
you weren't sure what you were working at. Is that right?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Um, and so I wanted to come back to one topic. What was it? Oh,
Mm-hmm. Therapist,
I'll come back
tests,
to it.
screenings.
I'll come back to it.
Okay.
Um, and so did you continue seeing that um, therapist or counselor when you came back?
Um,
That one that,
After the first three, I thought like, hey, maybe I'll try someone else because he was really, really old. And not that I question his professionalism or not, but it was also like a relationship kind of thing. Like,
yeah.
oh, like we'll come back to it, or maybe I'll try a woman because you're still spending your time with your therapist and you want to find someone that worked out. So um, I put my mental health on a back burner and I became a workaholic because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And before you know it, it went again, like until I found my current job that I've been in for like 2 years. One of the employee benefits was 8 free sessions of
Oh.
mental health appointments. So I didn't utilize that until like one of my like previous breakup relationships, and thought to take that advantage because they're all free from my work. Well, the first 8. So I forgot your question. Sorry.
Yeah. Did you continue to look for a counselor
Yes.
after this
Mm-hmm.
3 mini package counselor didn't work out?
Right. Yes. So I did, and I went to somewhere that is in the network that my work will cover, and yeah, so it was on to my 4th therapist, which is fine because like we all move, we all have different stages in our lives. I didn't want to try the virtual route. I wanted the in-person, but I saw the effectiveness of it in college, and I really liked the body language of the therapist, and it's healing to like have like human connection as well. So being an extrovert, I am living an introverted lifestyle. I try to exercise extrovertism as much as I can.
Okay.
be around people.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
like the in-person counseling.
Yeah, that's a good point, for those that are thinking about therapy, to think about, the,
Mm-hmm.
the implications of both. Because I also know that if you've got in person, then you got to consider the time to travel, right, to see this therapist. And depending how far away they are, that could take more time out of your day. Um, Maybe like online or telehealth could be a little easier to fit into like a busy schedule. That could also increase the therapist's range that you can see, right? You don't have to drive, so they could literally be placed sitting anywhere. Um, but it's definitely up to personal preference which route you go.
Mm. So yeah, and how I found the therapist for my work, they literally had like a 200-page like atlas of
Wow.
counselors I can go to, and they had a feature where you can like only telehealth or in person,
Mm,
one's in a radius of 20 miles. So you can really narrow down your search. Really great search engine optimization with my works
mm,
resource there. And so some of the stuff I was looking for was like, oh, therapists that are specialized in like behavior related things or trauma or
okay.
depression, anxiety. And you can be like counselors that are familiar with people of bilingual backgrounds because that affects mental health, and or um, like um, like faith-based counseling. Like you could filter out um, the specialties and focuses of each counselor because each counselor has their like niche and
Okay.
professionalism in that. So
Yeah,
I
for
went from
sure.
there. So
Okay.
that's something to look at.
So you were aware of yourself enough at that point to realize what specialties you would prefer in a therapist, and some of the
Mm-hmm.
things and the attributes you listed you were able to search on. That's really great. You mentioned something that's interesting to me, that coming from a bilingual background affects your mental health. Can you
Mm-hmm.
explain what that means?
Yeah, because the culture is different. Like, I am fluent in Cantonese Chinese, um, family from Hong Kong and Guangzhou area of China, um, and being first generation American, um, the culture is different because at home we speak Cantonese, but in my living every day, I speak English. So there's a clash in language personality and culture.
So
So
it's not just language. When you say bilingual, you sort of mean biculture, right?
oh,
Because,
yeah. So there's a
yeah,
clash there too, like identity related issues. Mm-hmm.
I can totally relate also being
Mm-hmm.
of Chinese, Vietnamese, actually a little more complex, I think, Chinese, Vietnamese, American background. It's like sometimes you feel stuck in limbo. You don't really, you kind of have to operate in two different spaces, right? Like if you're in a predominantly American culture, you like have to shift to the American culture and that style, where you're, at least when I'm at home, I mean, they call me an American girl, but I'm expected to behave in like a Chinese culture.
Yeah, because they want their offspring to be like
Mhm.
continuing their way of life or something.
Yeah, that's actually a topic that I think we want to cover in a future segment
Mm,
around mental health and what it is to be like the immigrant culture, or like
mm,
partially not truly American per American standards. What is American? But
yeah, for real. Um, so yeah, so that's where we left off,
okay.
and um, unfortunately, the therapist, it was a guy I was seeing at my work, was changing practices. So after like
Oh
4
no.
sessions, I was passed on to the CEO of the private practice, which my work was paying for. But
Yeah, yeah.
I was like trying to keep in mind these 8 sessions. I was like, oh no, like, why you gotta leave? We're already like building a relationship. You're already
Yeah.
understanding my life. But he was passing me on to the CEO, who was the like head therapist. And before you know it, COVID hit in March.
Oh, so that
And
brings you to COVID now.
oh yeah, mental health during COVID, which probably skyrocketed for that industry, but that's great. But definitely needed. It's unfamiliar for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
so
It's
it
great,
was
but it's not great.
right. So eventually, that was my first shift to
Okay.
counseling session, which is fine because at that point I loved connecting with people online like you, and FaceTiming and Skyping was fine for me. So
Okay.
I was open to that, but I knew I had to like share my background story again. So I was like using up all my free sessions that my work was like providing. Um, and this is unprofessional, not really related, but that fifth appointment with that new therapist. So at this point, I'm on my fifth therapist from like my whole journey of seeking
Yeah.
help in therapy and talking things out. Because I didn't want to like go to my friends. I recommend going to a therapist if you can. So it's professional help. And unfortunately, that counselor stood me up. We had a Zoom appointment made, and she did a no-show. And I
Wow.
called her, I emailed her, haven't heard a word since. I was literally stood up.
Oh my gosh. You know, that's
Yeah.
when you mentioned that, it made me think about some cases with my friends who have had to end relationships with therapists and they didn't know how to do it. And so they sometimes like would ghost their therapist, which
Oh,
is not good. But I've never heard of the other way around. Oh my gosh.
yeah, lack
How
of
did it make you feel?
professionalism. Well, as like a person seeking help, that could be really vulnerable and like so bad. So I'm like, okay, I'm done with this practice. Well, that was easy. On to the next.
Oh my God.
And honestly, the phones are definitely listening to us. And then before we knew it, an ad popped up.
I believe that. Okay.
And yeah, and this is not sponsored or anything, but I started going through betterhelp.com, which is like all over
Okay.
social media, where you can have like telehealth, you could text your counselor, you can video chat them, you can call them. So I went to therapist number 6.
Okay.
And it was really neat because they also listed their like niches and
Mm-hmm.
specializations. So I was looking for someone specialized in trauma, abuse, depression, anxiety, cultural background. Um, it's faith based. He was an ordained pastor. He had like 4 degrees, doctor of psychology, 30 plus years experience. He was really old, but and his wife was also Asian, so he like understood the
Oh,
bicultural background.
okay.
So I'm like, let's check this counselor out. And unfortunately, BetterHelp.com wasn't in the network that my work provided free services.
Oh,
So I just paid like the monthly um, cost, which was fine because like a lot was going on. Everyone's going through
mm,
COVID times, and I wanted to work on my mental health journey.
okay.
Mm,
Wow, that's very admirable of you. So what I'm hearing is mental health is definitely an investment. It
yeah.
may not be cheap. If you've got insurance to help, that's great. Um,
Mm,
but I mean, even in my case, like my insurance helped, but I had to put some resources, financial resources into that to
mm.
start. But you really do see the benefits, like
Oh yeah,
your
for sure.
experience. How do you feel
Yeah.
like you've changed, or if at all, from
Um,
seeing a counselor or a therapist?
yeah, a lot of like acceptance or accepting like where you're at with what you have. and just feel more at peace, like with your job or your academics. I mean, I like was not happy in some areas, and the counselor's job is to help guide you, like be at peace with your current situation, because like depression, anxiety, anxiety or to be anxious is like worrying about the future, and then depression is like always focusing on the past. But the therapist with this approach is like focusing on the present.
Okay.
And being peaceful is like when you're in the present and not replaying like mental things in your head and telling yourself negative things. And we would practice like different approaches and what we can do. Or like I was unhappy with my job, and then we were finding out like, oh, why? And then we're finding like things we can do. And now I feel better. Like I think therapy and counseling is great. And especially since I've been working for like 3 years now, I felt okay to do that investment for myself, because I want to change. So I think it comes back to an individual. Like if you need help and seeking help, that's like really brave and strong of you. And it comes back to yourself. Like you're helping yourself, and you're living with yourself, and you're only yourself. So I think it's like totally worth it. And go like see someone. And if you can't find your therapist like I did, like just keep networking or like finding other therapists to see who you connect with.
Oh, it makes me so happy to hear that. I'm glad that therapy has had that effect on you. And actually, I've never heard depression and anxiety described that way, but that makes a lot of sense. Just depression being kind of focused on the past, and anxiety being, stressed and focused on the future. I think to have both can be a lot.
Yeah, that's not the all-in answer, but that's kind of what I got from some of my therapy sessions.
Great. So we're running a little bit, short on time now, and I'd like to throw you one last question for our audience here. What advice do you have for someone who is thinking about therapy, never been, maybe they don't have a lot of friends that have gone to therapy, they're a little bit nervous, they're afraid because it's stigmatized, anything you'd like to share about it?
Be the change. Like, you are the CEO of your own life. Make that decision for yourself. If you want to be happy, if you want things answered, if you want help, just go at it, go for it. And that's how you're going to propel forward and progress or move, because you don't want to be stagnant when you're feeling low or depressed. Like, the thing is to not stay where you're at. So just keep moving forward. And I would just say go for it. And ask your friends, ask someone you trust, ask your mentor or someone you look up to, and just see their approaches, so that you can either choose to do that approach as well, or try a different route, whatever like makes sense for you.
Great. That's so encouraging, Katie. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, with that, I'd like to offer you the space to give any shout outs or social media plugs, and then we'll wrap up with some thank yous.
Yeah, thank you to Sav for this interview, and Tiffany, host. And I do have a personal YouTube page if you're interested in like lifestyle content, some music, and I also do commercial print modeling. If you want to know that background, you can follow me at youtube.com/KATYYHO. That's Katie Ho, my full name. And my Instagram at _Katie Ho, KATYHO. And yeah, thank you for this episode.
Great. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you're able to interact with us in the chat box. Again, not live, but sort of live. If you like this content, please subscribe to our channel if you have not already. please comment below. We'd love to interact with you, and we'll catch you all next week or the week after for our next segment. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.